10:03. A few housekeeping rules. If you just put your phones on mute, if you would, or silence or vibrate, I'd appreciate it. Also, if we would say your name before you speak for the viewing public, that would be great. So, with that said, let's do roll call. Dolores Compion, here. Mr. Benter, here. Mr. Anderson, excused. Mr. Pat Kiley,
here.
Mr. David Morris, excused. Mr. David Yelovich,
Here.
Mr. Robert Stanley,
Here.
Mr. William Weatherly,
Here.
Mr. Gary D.
Gary Halsey.
Halsey, here. I certify that we have a quorum. So, look, first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here today. I want to thank all the TDLR staff members for making this possible for us to come up here and sit and do this for our industry, for our constituents, and for our license holders. So we've had a lot of changes on our board over the last couple of months. So I would, from my left to right, I would like each of the new members to introduce themselves. So if you would.
I'm Rob Stanley from Canyon, Texas. I'm Rob Stanley from Canyon, Texas.
My name's Jerry Bittner, and I'm from Round Rock, Texas.
I am William Weatherly, known as Bill. I'm from Austin, Texas.
I'm Gary Halsey. I'm Haslett, Texas, just north of Fort Worth, right next door to Alliance Airport, south of the Texas Motor Speedway. So now you know where Haslett is.
I actually knew where that was at.
Good.
At this time, I'd like to thank John Lane for his years of service. John has been in a servant for many, many years, not only in the Marine Corps, but in his business, his industry, and to the TDLR over the last few years that I've known him. So I really want to thank you for your commitment and diligence. And so I tip my hat off to you. I had one. Thank you so much, Mr. Lane.
Thank you, sir.
For your service. So with that said, I'd like to approve the minutes from March the 8th. Noted that we didn't have a quorum the last meeting, so these minutes are from March the 8th. There is a slight change. We added Mr. Trevor Brown to the that was missing in the minutes in the work group. So with that said, do I hear a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I second.
And that is Mr. Kiley on motion 1 and Mr.
Halsey.
Mr. Halsey. So we approve the minutes. So do we have any public comments? We'll move to Agenda D.
Mr. Compion, we did get the motion, Mary Winston, TDLR, we got the motion to approve, we got a second, and now we just have to take a vote.
Oh, my apologies. Ayes for approval?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Perfect.
Motion carries. So can we move to item D? Any public comments? There are no public comments, so let's move to item E, staff reports. Nick?
Mr. Chairman and members, Nick Voinis of TDLR, and here to bring you the Executive Office report. As you remember, the last few months, start of the year seems like a long time ago, but the 85th session of the Texas Legislature convened. They were here January to Memorial Day. It was arguably the busiest that TDLR has ever experienced. They even came back during the summer for a 30-day special session. And just to review, this past regular session, more than 6,500 bills were filed, and TDLR staff tracked a total of 341, including 130 that were directly related to current TDLR programs, 20 that dealt with new or transfer programs, and 191 that, if enacted, would have affected agency operations. Staff worked really hard to analyze, monitor bills, providing feedback, resource testimony. TDLR leadership and staff attended 65 hearings before 20 different committees in the House and Senate. During the past session, one bill affecting this program passed and was signed into law by the governor, and that was House Bill 3029 by Representative John Frullo and sponsored by Senator John Whitmire, that amends the current law relating to education and certification of air conditioning and refrigeration technicians. I'm going to leave the details to that up to David and Doug here in a little bit when they present item G on the agenda. Staff's been busy most recently preparing to implement bills, including House Bill 3029. It's been a total team effort as all divisions have been involved in developing rules, communicating to stakeholders, appointing and prepping advisory boards, hiring additional staff, dealing with education, exams, IT, and other things. If you'd like to see a full report of our legislative program this past session, go to our website, tdlr.texas.gov, and click on the Capitol picture there, and it'll take you to a page, and all the legislation is listed by program. So it's all there. In the last couple of months, our staff has been working hard to help licensees and small businesses recover from the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey along the Texas coast. We call it Texans Helping Texans. Again, an entire staff effort. And we have our what we call our disaster recovery team that has been focused on helping in these areas and working with each of our divisions in coordination with the governor's office and the governor's Rebuild Texas efforts. We've been implementing procedures for all eligible licensees in the affected areas to help them recover and return to work as quickly as possible. It started several days before Harvey first hit the Texas coast. We had staff ready to and been busy extending license expiration dates, waiving late fees, license replacement fees, waiving CE requirements, and extending grace periods for expired licenses in those affected areas. It all began with our tow program, where we worked to allow out-of-state towers to come in to help our in-state towers clear flooded and abandoned vehicles from roads and parking areas. And we also used regulations for vehicle storage facilities to help make it easier for these vehicles to be transported to salvage yards and get to business as usual. In summary, we've worked hard to remove the burden of red tape for people in those affected areas to rebuild and recover. Again, information on all this is on our website, tdlr.texas.gov, and you can go to a Harvey page there, and our efforts are summarized there. Want to also take a minute to promote our social media accounts. We are on Facebook and Twitter, so you can follow our events and news there, in addition to our website. But going back to the website for a minute, I wanted to share with you some recent web traffic with our ACR page on our site. It's been pretty busy over the last 6 months. The ACR website has had 190,732 page views. That's more than 31,000 page views a month. And the busiest month was last month, September, with with more than 40,000 page views. 56% of the people accessing that page or that site did so from a mobile device, meaning a smartphone or a tablet, compared to 34% that did so from a desktop computer. And the top reasons for visiting the ACR site, number one was online license applications and renewals. Second, frequently asked questions, followed by laws and rules, forms and applications, and exams and CE information. Thank you, and if you have any questions, be glad to answer them.
And we appreciate all y'all's efforts. So I just have one question. When we go through this disaster recovery process, is there a gradual end date to the efforts of
Right,
license?
the governor extended the disaster declaration the other day, so
Do we align ourselves with
we'll align ourselves with that, yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? All right, Compliance Division, Mr. David.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. David Gonzalez, Regulatory Programs Manager. The item on the agenda is recent developments. Our compliance staff reports are generally brief, but this one is brief and very significant. If you were not aware, Mr. John Lane has retired from the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. Before he did so, he conferred with staff on all the enforcement cases, trying to tie up the loose ends and get things in nice, neat order so he could move on to time with his wife and other endeavors that he wanted to pursue. He also helped us initiate the House Bill 3029 bill implementation team, which we have continuing efforts from all the staff contribute to those efforts. But he actually is the one that initiated. He was our team lead on it, and so he has transferred those responsibilities on to me. I get to inherit those responsibilities for leading the team for the bill implementation. And again, tied up loose matters on compliance before he left. He's actually made himself available as necessary for questions. We don't want to take advantage of his hospitality in that endeavor in those regards, but there's some cases that were initiated where he did the investigation, and he may be available for us for state office administrative hearings as necessary. We're not, again, going to take advantage of the situation. It's very kind of him to offer his time to even consider that. But that resignation was a big change to our program. We currently have a program specialist position out there that was going to be a deputy for the chief ACR program specialist. Now I have to work with our HR department to post not only that position, which at present has not had applicants that have met the qualifications, at least last check with HR. So I have to find time to get with HR to make a posting, and I plead to you and to the public at this point, please keep an eye out for these postings. We need somebody that is willing to put their time and their desire to serve the public ahead of sometimes some other endeavors they may have, because we definitely need a chief ACR specialist for the program, for the technical aspects, and to continue running the program at the level it's been done for many years. So I put those words out, and hopefully y'all will see the posting soon so that we can get many applications and we can start the interview process. With that said, in September, Mr. Lane actually, after he retired, still was made himself available to participate as our exam development leader. We actually have a subject matter expert team besides Mr. Lane that contribute to the development of the exam, and that will continue. The third-party PSI that actually administers our exam, they still have control over how we do our exam development, but it's those subject matter experts and the coordination from our program specialists that got all their efforts together and advise us on how to develop the exam and the content and review the questions if there's any challenges or issues that come up with those questions, and that will continue. Again, we're hoping to get somebody on board to help with those, lead those efforts, and lead our subject matter experts going forward. Lastly, for the public record, I wanted to congratulate John on his retirement. I'm very happy for him. Just a little bit jealous, just a little bit jealous. His work was exemplary, integrity beyond reproach, and simply he made this agency look good. With the work he did, I could always count on the product, the output, always being stellar. And Anybody that's gotten to meet him knows that that is the case. Takes pride in his work and made us proud. Wish him the very best. Thank you, John. Any questions for me at this time?
Board, any questions for Mr. Gonzalez?
Do you have any bets in the office about when he's going to unretire?
To my knowledge, he's already unretired, but it's at his will when he decides to work. So you'd have to contact him. In fact, I just picked up a card from him myself on when he's going to be available for additional work.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Move on to Education and Exam Division.
Good morning, Chairman and board members. My name is Lorraine Srove, and I am with the Education and Examination Division. You should have our report in front of you, which you will find all of the statistics and numbers regarding the exams and continuing education. If you will notice, since we just met in July, those numbers really haven't changed that much. They've remained consistent. And the division's concentrated efforts have been, as has already been shared, mainly Hurricane Harvey and helping the schools in those areas, as well as the implementation of Phase 2 programs, which start next week, November 1st. So after you've reviewed that, if you have any questions, that's all I have for you this morning.
Dolores Compion, I have one question.
Sure.
The influx from outside the state contractors, do you have a generic number of how many have applied?
How many have applied?
For licensing?
No, that may
That'd be a
be
different
something
group?
that licensing should have possibly that information for you, but of course we'd be happy to get that if that's something that you would be interested in knowing.
All right, thank you.
You're
It
welcome.
would be good to see what kind of gap that we might have.
Sure. Make a note of that, and we'll get that to you as soon as possible.
I had Dave Yelovic, a general question about education.
Uh-huh.
When it comes to the entire state, is the majority of the education taking place in community colleges now, or is it individual providers, trade schools, high schools? Where do you see education going? Is it going to be something where community colleges are the ones providing this solely?
Are you referring strictly to pre-licensing education, or are you also interested in continuing education?
Basically pre-licensing, but then, CE eventually.
Sure. The majority of that, as those certifications and stuff come in, do seem to be centrally located with most of your colleges and universities. But there are some that, I can't give you exact numbers on those, but from the certifications that have been seen, there is a large majority of those coming from the colleges and universities. Plus, if you look on the website, you will see all of those approved certification programs, and there is a large majority actually available. There are several that come from the trade programs as well, trade
Tell
schools.
me, what tools do we have as far as auditing, or perhaps which schools might have better programs than others? Basically, what
So
I'm asking.
evaluating that program? Now, the schools that meet those qualifications, those are actually reviewed by our compliance division instead of the education division. So I would have to refer that to compliance
Back to
to
David.
see what kind of process is available for that. You want to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you.
Ms. Yelovich, so the programs that were the nationally recognized programs that have been accepted have pretty much been a very broad category because of the way the statute's written. We had to be accepting of anything that met the criteria for a nationally recognized test. Mr. Lane was our previous reviewer of those programs. It ran the gamut from trade schools to colleges on what was actually submitted to us. With the new statutory requirements coming into place, it's probably going to take a different case on the certification, and we'll probably get in a little bit of detail on that on the agenda item G. But as far as keeping statistics, other than reviewing the names of what's currently on our website right now, there's no statistics that are separately kept on whether they're from trade associations, from colleges, and what their success rate was for those individuals that may be, we've been able to do this with like examinations, capture data on who's taking a test, but not necessarily, I don't think y'all are tracking it for every technician that ends up taking that ACR contractor exam, what their background was. We have discussed adding questions to the examination. It's almost like a pre-test prior to the examination. Could you please tell us where you got your education, how many years experience? We've definitely moved that direction with the electricians. I'm not sure if we've explored that as much with the ACR, but because of these very issues and the desire to have more technicians and qualified individuals working out in this industry, there's a shortage. It's very difficult to find these people. We've talked about trying to get that data and capture that data. The easiest way for us to do it would probably be through the examination, but that means adding time to their
it came to light. I got a little concerned in my area down along the coast where, in general, and we can talk later on details, but heads of departments and schools that make it public knowledge that he doesn't believe Emmanuel J is accurate. He doesn't believe that houses need fresh air. He believes that you can size a unit using a square foot method. But yet this is the head of this education arm, and I have issues with those things.
Understandably, understandable.
This is a, thank you, David, component that could be addressed as we start implementing the new House bill and that new certification process. So I will definitely make a note of that so that the team can look at what might work best to get some of that information
Great.
Available. Okay?
Thank you for your input.
You're welcome.
Dolores Campion, Mr.
Yes.
This will be more directed at Mr. Gonzalez.
Okay.
So, while Mr. Yelovich was speaking, so currently we have no process in place to, and I know it takes time and it takes staffing, so in consideration to all that, there is no in-classroom monitoring at this point in time.
So make sure there's a distinction between CE, continuing education, versus pre-licensure. The pre-licensure, it's a review of their course to make sure it matches the statutory criteria. Once they get on our list, anybody that meets that criteria could come into us as a certified technician. What our E&E section does is monitoring of continuing education providers. Now, I'm not sure what the statistics are on those things. I've deferred to her on those things. But our continuing education providers do get monitoring and oversight just depending on how many programs there are. And I'm not sure which one you're alluding to. Is it the pre-licensure you're interested in or the continuing education?
A little bit of both, but we'll talk about that at a later date.
Definitely no monitoring on the pre-licensure because they're universities and everybody, and yeah, limited staff to do that.
The thought was really quick when if we're accepting that as a fact that this is what we're going to utilize for the acceptance of the application, then it was just an afterthought. So appreciate it. Dolores Campion.
Do you have any other questions or?
Well, this discussion has brought up a lot of questions, but nonetheless, that'll be for another time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Any more questions? Thank you so much. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
your time.
Thanks, David.
Item number 4. Enforcement Division.
Good morning. My name is John Mellock. I'm a prosecutor with the Enforcement Division. And unlike David, I am going to take full advantage of John Lane's kindness and curiosity to help us in any matter. So, John, just be on call. With that, we're going to kind of go through some speaking engagements and things that the Enforcement Division has been doing recently since the last meeting. The first one was in August 15th at the Texas Air Conditioning Contractors of America. We had our lead investigator, Harrigan Demos, attend a meeting in the Houston area. She provided information on the enforcement activities, recent activities, including the undercover stings that we perform, 2 of which were in the city of Alamo and Sour Lake, Texas. One was in South Texas. One was over in the East Texas area. And then, obviously, she took questions and answered any concerns there. The second one was on June 21st. It was the International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials. Our investigator, Tony Gattaca, attended that meeting. It was a meeting of the International Plumbing and Mechanical Officials, the American Society of Sanitary Engineers, the American Society of Plumbing Engineers, and it was also in Houston. He gave a presentation to those groups of what the department does and how it serves its many licensees, many who had previously not heard of TDLR, and they were especially happy that we were trying to promote the trades and keep it at a professional level. Furthermore, on June 28th, investigator Robert Nino, along with John Lane, made a joint presentation to some duly enrolled HVAC classes at the South Texas Vocational Technical Institute. It consisted of the enforcement procedures, the newly passed legislation on the certified technician, which we'll hear more about later, and then they obviously entertained any questions. Regarding some of the sting activities that we've conducted, on July 18th and 19th of this year, the enforcement investigators conducted one of these undercover stings in the Sour Lake, Texas area. It's over in East Texas. Obviously, the purposes of all these stings is to make sure that we catch under-licensed and unlicensed people from continuing to try to perform AC services that they're not qualified to perform. In this area, we collected a compilation of Craigslist, South Texas, SoutheastTexas.com, Home Advisor, Thumbtack, all these kind of general sites that people can advertise on. From that, we got 22 leads, of which 13 cases were open for people who either gave written bids or came out to the sting locations. May not have given the bid, but they were advertising. So those cases all get transferred to the prosecution section for prosecution of those cases. Moving on to some highlighted cases, these will kind of move in chronological order. So on July 5th, an agreed order was entered into against a Christopher Dean, who was doing business as Climate Control LLC. He was ordered to have a 1-year probated suspension of his air conditioning contractor's license and was assessed an administrative penalty for failing to obtain a permit prior to commencing the work and also failing to provide proper installation in 2 separate residential locations. It was primarily related to the condensate and drain line installations at these locations. I checked this morning, and that penalty has been paid in full. So he's still under that agreed order on the probated suspension. So if anything happens further, we will probably look to suspend his license. But he has paid the penalty. On July 11th, we had a default order against a Brett Waymare doing business as Affordable AC, where we revoked his license and an assessed penalty of $20,000 for failure to comply with a previous order and 4 separate incidents of unlicensed air conditioning work in the North Texas, Parker, Weiss, and Tarrant County areas. I checked this morning, and he hasn't paid anything, and we've moved that case over to our collections department. July 14th, there was another default order against Joseph Michael Lopez, doing business as No Sweat AC Heating. And he also had a 1-year probated suspension of his technician's license and had a $4,000 penalty for basically advertising and performing AC services without having a contractor's license. The one case in particular, he did some installation that cost the consumer $4,600. And again, this morning I checked, and nothing has yet been paid. July 25th, there was an agreed order against Kerry Nichols, doing business as Specialty Mechanical Services, and he was given a 6-month probated suspension of his contractor's license and ordered to complete a class on relevant codes, and was assessed a penalty of $3,000 for 2 separate cases of failing to obtain permits prior to commencing work and failure to provide proper installation. I checked this morning, and he had paid $1,000 of the $3,000 fine. On July 31st, a default order was entered against James Sexton of Sexton's Heating and Air, and he was assessed an administrative penalty of $14,000, which were from 3 separate consumer cases. The first case was a $6,000 penalty for offering to perform and performing replacement of a residential system and using a contractor's license of somebody that was not his. The second case was a $4,000 penalty for unlicensed offer to install a system at a consumer's house. And the final case was also a $4,000 penalty for installing a system at a home. He has not paid anything else, and this also has been moved over to our collections department. The final few cases are all agreed orders. The first one is against Edward Foy, doing business as Priority Cool and Heating. He was assessed an administrative penalty of $3,000 for failing to provide proper installation and failing to ensure that the adequate grill and duct system was installed to provide the proper airflow. He has paid $2,000 of a $3,000 fine. On August 24th, an agreed order was entered into against Juan Carlos Ramirez, doing business at JCR AC Services. $3,000 fine was administered for installing a system by providing a bid in the amount, and this was actually part of a sting operation, and he has actually paid $750 of the $3,000 fine at this point. The last case, it was also an agreed order. John Paul Culbertson, doing business as Texas Farm and Ranch Heating and Air. He had a 1-year probated suspension of his license. He was assessed a $500 penalty for engaging in an unlicensed air conditioning technician to install a unit in someone's home. So he's actually hired someone who didn't have any qualifications and to do some maintenance work, and he's paid $450 of the $500 fine that we assessed. If you look at the statistics below, as you can see, through the fiscal year of 2017, which ended in August 31st, we opened 1,000 new cases, which of all TDLR programs is about almost 9% of the cases that TDLR received in total. We resolved a little over 1,000 again, which is about another 8%. As you can see, we had 131 agreed orders. We collected nearly $1 million out of, we assessed nearly $1 million, collected nearly $200,000. So we've got about a 20% collection rate on that, which is almost kind of in line with what TDLR collects in general for the other programs. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Yes,
so in looking at this, to me, I may be looking at it wrong. So for all the license types, TDLR monitors, ACR is comprising about 10%.
Yes, that's correct.
And how many different licenses do we have?
30,
TDLR.
we have 32 right now, and I think November we'll have 38, if I'm correct. Different license programs with multiple sub-license types in each program. So
we've got a predominant.
It is a significant amount, yes, sir.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
I was curious, Dave Yelovic, you skipped over one here, this one on August 8th. I'm sorry if you said it, but I noticed $128,000 is a big chunk of your total down there. I was wondering if you could expand on that. Is this a story of a guy who just, no matter what you do, he just keeps doing what he's doing all over the state because he seems to be from Odessa to the Panhandle?
Which one are you referring to?
Gustavo O'Hara.
Okay, that, I think, unfortunately, that one was actually supposed to be pulled out. He's actually on a motion for rehearing right now, so he's still in the process. So essentially what happened, he had asked for, I think it was a default order, and then he has a chance to ask for a motion for rehearing. So it's still currently in the TDLR process right now.
How do you, I'm just curious, how do you assess, how do you get to $128,000 in penalties?
Typically, it's multiple homes, multiple locations, multiple violations per home per violation. We have a penalty range, and probably most of those are Class C violations, which has a range of between $1,000 and $5,000. Typically, for mechanical integrity, we'll charge about $4,000 per violation. So it could be an instance where he had several different homes that he had gone to with multiple violations per home, and so sometimes it can add up pretty high.
Interesting story. Thank you.
Dolores Compion, I have a few questions. Can you kind of just go over the collection process that you referred to, Ms., that when we hand them over to the collections, what does that look like? And
So typically, when either we get an agreed order or a default order, we have a monitor. Enforcement has a monitor for at least the agreed orders that will make sure that if they're on a payment plan, they're sending the payments in on time. If they miss a payment, they will send out a notice letter saying, hey, you missed a payment. Let's make sure we get that in time. If they miss a couple of payments, then they'll send out a second letter. And then at that point in time, it typically is referred over to our GC. The default orders also get referred over to GC, and they will send collection letters, essentially basically debt collection letters. If the amount is high enough, and it's typically, I want to say it's about $5,000 or more, they will usually refer those over to the AG's office for collections and let them kind of handle it. So, and it could be anything from putting like a warrant hold on their account in case anything happens that the state gets notice of, that maybe they can put an attachment on it. But that's typically the way we handle it.
I have one last question.
Yes, sir.
In these cases where, I'm sorry.
For the viewing public.
It's Gary Halsey. In these cases where, a licensed or unlicensed contractor has committed an offense of some sort and it's got to TDLR and a penalty is assessed, are they forced to rectify that problem with that homeowner?
Unfortunately, we don't have the authority to force them to do anything. It depends on the situation sometimes that the enforcement staff and the prosecutors will sometimes, either through the investigator or one of the prosecutors, will ask the consumer, because sometimes they just had such a bad experience with a guy, they don't want that to happen. They don't want that person back on their property or fixing their system. There are other instances that they will accept that. And so in those events, we do make those opportunities available to the respondent. Say, hey, if you go and fix the system or repair it or make sure that someone else, or pay for someone else to fix it or something along those lines, the complainant would be willing to withdraw the complaint so long as they're happy. So we do kind of go outside the normal enforcement procedures to say, hey, if you can make it right, maybe everything will be okay. So we do give that, but a lot of times the consumer just feels really burned, and they don't want that person back on the property at all.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Weatherly here. I have a question also. In a case where the consumer is wronged and maybe hasn't paid the contractor that was unlicensed or wronged them, would they be, would the state not allow, say, a mechanic's lien disallowed, or they would not be able to collect from the...
Well, if a consumer has done like that and the AC contractor just put a mechanics lien, we don't have any jurisdiction on that to say that they can or can't do any of that kind of stuff. So we kind of stay out of that.
Okay.
Jerry Bittner, I have a question with, particularly with respect to the unlicensed individuals that get caught up in these things. Do we know where and how these folks get the equipment and the refrigerants? It's my understanding that the vendors are supposed to restrict sales of equipment and or refrigerants to licensed individuals, and I haven't seen anything in any of these enforcement summaries that indicate that we're looking at preventing these people from getting the equipment with which they need to perform the services.
Right. Unfortunately, we don't regulate the supply houses, and so because we can't regulate them, we can't tell them not to sell to people who don't have a license or somebody who may be under license. If it was something that was under our purview, we could probably take stronger action on it to make sure that these people that are unlicensed don't get their hands on this stuff. But sadly, we don't regulate them at this point.
I know that's, excuse me, Gary Halsey, Mr. Chairman, if I may. There are supply houses out there who voluntarily will ask for a copy of your license and your EPA certification, and it's that one item, the EPA, that allows you to buy that refrigerant. And also the law allows that a homeowner can repair his own system.
Correct.
So therefore, he would need, without a license, be able to buy these tools.
Right.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, new members, and board members. I'm Lisa Hodek, the Licensing Division Manager. And my report is pretty basic. I've got the fiscal year 15-16 and totals for 17 for the contractors, registered technicians, certified technicians, and then a combination of all of the license types at the bottom. The overall numbers, we are seeing an increase. The contractors were now up to new licenses issued is 957, and of course this is for total fiscal year 17, which is through August 31st. The AC technician registrations, the total population is 23,198. And I'd also like to point out for the AC technician registrations that as Nick talked a little bit about the Hurricane Harvey recovery, over the last 2 months from August 25th to October 24th, we have issued 1,007 new registered technician licenses, and 877 of those were in Texas, 130 of those were out of state. So that was just within the last 2 months. The technician registration is an easier application type. They can register online for those. So that's a pretty big number to help with the hurricane. And a total of all of the licenses issued is 44,952. And then in closing on my report, I also want to congratulate Mr. Lane and thank him very much for all the help that he's given us. We worked with him very closely and a lot of times use his expertise in his technical field. So thank you, John. We miss you. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Dolores Compion, a couple of questions. How many of those were through the reciprocity process from other states?
Which licenses are you talking about?
Whether it be A, B, or C.
The contractor licenses? I don't have those numbers with me. We don't issue a lot of reciprocity licenses for this group. The only states that we have reciprocity with, I think, is North Carolina and
South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Georgia.
Georgia and South Carolina. So we don't get a lot, but I can look at that for you and either email you or have those numbers for you at the next board meeting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's Gary Halsey. But you did mention about technicians.
Yes.
And some of those were out of state?
Yes, we had
About 10%?
130, and I have a list of all of the out-of-state. They're not specifically for air conditioning.
Okay.
But if you're interested in a particular state, I can tell you how many.
That's all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dave Yelovic, I just noticed just numbers, lots of numbers in this report.
Uh-huh.
Contractors, as I would expect, it did go up, quite a jump. You can go across the board on all these, it seems to be quite a jump. So when I got down to the certified technicians, everything's trending up, except for that one about new licenses issued. That's the only one where it seems to have taken a dip. Is there a reason for that, or?
I don't know the reason offhand. So I couldn't tell you. I'm going to expect that in the future they're going to start climbing because of the recent bill and because it will allow them to grandfather in, so to speak. Doug and David will be touching on the House Bill 3029 shortly. But I would think that we would get an increase in the next few months, would be my guess. Also on the certified, it is, it does kind of vary because fiscal year 15 it was just over 1,100, and then fiscal 16 it was 1,500, and then it did drop. So,
but it was trending up. Everything seems to be trending up over the past few years. That's the first drop I'd seen in that line. I was just curious if there was, everyone's waiting for the new law or what?
It could be. It could also be that they applied for their AC contractor license. So it could be a number of things.
Thank you.
Dolores Compion, what you just mentioned, it could be that they applied for the license. Do you have a mechanism that goes that he's in the pipeline, so to say, with a certified or registered technician, and he moves on to the contractor's license, is there a number or percentage that move on to that career path is really what I'm trying to ask.
I
If they're
don't.
utilizing that career path that we're trying to implement.
I don't have that number. I can try to figure that one out also, like for the next board meeting.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are at item F.
Good morning again. John Millock with the Prosecution Office. So what this item is talking about is the discussion of possible appointment of a work group to look at the penalty matrix. For the new members, I'll kind of briefly explain what the penalty matrix is. It's a document that is also published on TDLR's website, and it basically tries to encapsulate all the laws and rules and puts them in a fashion. It's almost like a charging kind of instrument in the sense that if you violate this rule, this is kind of the range of penalties you can expect. And we break them down into class A, B, C, and D, with A being the least severe, more of records violations and not having your license on certain documents, and class D's being you committed fraud to get the license or you failed to comply with a previous order. So most of your mechanical integrity type issues fall under class C, some permit issues fall in class B. So what we were asking for is, especially with the recent addition of House Bill 3029, we're going to have to obviously update the rules, whereby we're going to have probably some new categories of possible violations. So we think it's a good time to take a look at the enforcement matrix as a whole to see if the categories that we currently have fit the needs of the industry, if the violations, things that we're charging, are appropriately being charged, if there's maybe some tweaks that we need to be made with that, and to find out where some of these new programs or these new license types might need to fit, and the violations that are associated where they need to fit in that document. So at this point, we're just kind of asking for a work group. I believe, how many can we have? We have up to four members. So, and we would work with staff with you on that, kind of get you guys ideas to see where you think that things need to follow. If things are great and things are in the appropriate categories, that'll just make the job easier. If things need to be moved around, we're happy to do that as well. So.
Laura's Complaint, just a quick question. The ask to create this work group, because the matrix just got reviewed here just a year or two ago. Is that correct?
A couple of years ago, yes.
A couple of years ago. And so, make sure I understand that the ask is to increase the penalty matrix?
No, it's not to increase it. It's just
to decrease.
It's to whatever it needs to be done. We might need to make some changes, saying, you know what, these violations, we're starting to see more of these in the industry, and we don't think that we're charging them as appropriate as we should. It may be that we not need to change a whole lot, but we definitely do, with the new House bill, need to add in some of these certified licenses fit them into the penalty matrix, because there are going to be different violations associated with those. So we will need to make some of those changes, but at the same time, we just want to take a look at it and say, are we doing everything that we need to be doing, and are these violations being charged appropriately?
John, Mary Winston, TDLR. Mr. Chair, our enforcement division has a sort of catbird seat to see what the trends are of violations, what's kind of going on out there. And we do have a new bill to consider, so we have some new things that we have to add into that penalty matrix. But we like to just assess it to make sure we're on point. And this is what we use the expertise of the advisory board for. We have certain things that are more administrative violations, paperwork driven, and certain things that are structural integrity driven for whatever program. What's the weight of those things? They are violations. We ask for your expertise to help us to assess the weight of those violations. Are we on the right track? Are we on the wrong track? That's kind of what we do. And we don't just make that one matrix, keep that matrix forever. We tweak it. So when a new bill comes up, we look at that, but we also assess what we already have out there. And that's what we use you guys for, and I'll say like my boss, even though you are all guys, that's generic and gender-free.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I was more referencing, you know, the work group and what dynamics were we looking at. Clearly explained. Thank you. So with that said, I would love to be on that work group. Do I have any other volunteers?
Gary Halsey, I'd like to volunteer.
Rob Stanley.
Mr. Gary? Mr. Stanley, right?
Bill Weatherly.
And that makes 4, right?
Yes. All right, thank you guys, and we'll be in touch with you guys to start this. And like I said, we don't have to meet here in Austin, but we can obviously meet via phone conference. But we'll be in touch with you guys. Work with your schedules. Thanks.
Thank you. Agenda G.
Good morning, Chair, board members. Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel for the department. The highlight of my day here is explaining, kind of running through House Bill 3029. You've heard it alluded to several times already. And we're just going to, David and I are going to explain. I'm going to give a summary of the bill in case you're not familiar with it. And we'll talk about what we at the department are doing to put the bill into, to put our bill implementation timeline into motion. And also we'll cover some deadlines and some things that we'll be asking you to do. So a brief summary of House Bill 3029. House Bill 3029 creates a new kind of licensee. And it gets a little bit confusing, so I'll be careful here. It creates a new kind of licensee called the certified technician. Well, you'll know from the current law that we already have a type of licensee called a certified technician. Really, the current certified technician is a registered technician who has completed or passed a nationally certified or nationally recognized certification exam that the department has approved. And so we're going to kind of have to change our terminology, and you'll see why I'm talking about this now. Right now what we say is when a certified technician, as the law used to stand, is someone who has been designated as a certified technician, is a registered technician who has been designated as a certified technician. House Bill 3029 creates a different creature, a different license type called the certified technician. And it's confusing because we're using the same terminology that existed prior to the bill, but it means a different thing. Now, the new type of certified technician, the eligibility requirements are as follows. The person has to be 18 years or older. There's a competency exam involved in this. And the person must have either completed a certification training program within the previous 48 months or have completed 24 months of practical experience under the supervision of an ACR contractor. So it introduces the concept of a certification training program. And now what that is a combination of classroom experience, classroom instruction, and practical experience in a minimum of 2,000 hours, or that's typically a year of practical experience. And so the statute kind of creates this in the hierarchy of things with contractor at the top, certified technician. The new form of certified technician would be below that in terms of experience and education. Am I speaking correctly on this, David? And then kind of lower, we have registered technicians for which you know there's no experience requirement. And above that, the old form of certified technician, which we just discussed. And so there's just a kind of throwing a different license type into the mix, and it may be confusing just because some of the terms that we're using now we've used to mean other things in the past. House Bill 3029 also creates an additional path to licensure as an ACR contractor. You know, you're familiar with the way previously the law stood was if a person passed a competency exam, et cetera, and also had 48 months of practical experience within the last 72, that was how you became a contractor. This creates another leg. If a person holds a technician certification, which is what we're going to call this new thing, for 12 months, and also possesses 36 months of practical experience within the past 48 months, again under the supervision of a contractor, that is the second pathway to licensure as a contractor. Again, both are going to involve a competency exam, but it's two paths now instead of one. And additionally, House Bill 3029 allows students who are enrolled in a certification training program. I believe there's a provision is really aimed at high school students who are 18 years or under and are enrolled in a program. They will be allowed to actually perform services under the supervision of an ACR contractor without having to have a license from the department. You know, once you become 18, if you're going to be enrolled in one of these programs, you will want to have some kind of license type, presumably registered technician. But it does carve out a little exemption and allows contractors to hire students enrolled in these programs as long as they're adequately supervised. Now, kind of where things get interesting for us is implementing these bills, especially considering the grandfathering provisions of House Bill 3029. What House Bill 3029 tells us is up until, I believe, the end of August 2018, people who are licensed as the old form of certified technician or have applied for that designation, the previous law will continue in effect for those people as long as they want to maintain that certified technician title. The new form of certified technician comes into existence on September 1st, 2018. And that is the day we start accepting applications for the new program. And so our real challenge here is going to be, as we draft rules to implement this program, is to recognize that there are some people who are currently certified technicians who will want to keep that title and will not want to jump into this new form of certified technician. And so understanding that we're going to have people who want to maintain this designation, and just we've got to come up with some terminology to treat them differently in the rules, just because what it was a certified technician is not a certified technician. You can see, obviously, that sentence seems absurd, but unfortunately it's also true. And so that's going to be our challenge. And I'll speak about our bill implementation process. Mr. Lane, before he left us all in tears, started the bill implementation procedure for the agency, and now Mr. Gonzalez has taken that over. And what we've really got to do is we have to create some rules for the ACR program that put House Bill 3029 into motion and also solve some of the underlying questions that maybe the statute didn't answer. And we're kind of in the process of discovering if there are any of those questions. And so we have to, we're having a lot of internal meetings, drafting a lot of frequently asked questions, making sure that our interpretation of the bill is sound, and making sure that we're consistently delivering the same interpretation to all of our licensees or potential licensees. And so we've got a big effort going that you're not really seeing right now, but it will start to percolate up here fairly soon. We are drafting rules. I don't have anything prepared for you today because we're still kind of vetting them internally. But we will present you some rules in January, and now we'll move to kind of our timeline. As some of you know, maybe most of you know, as an agency, when we adopt rules, it kind of takes it takes time to do so. When we propose rules, we have to file them with a publication called the Texas Register. We have to allow public comment for 30 days. And what we like to do is have a meeting of the board where we show you the rules, we have a vibrant discussion about the rules, and ultimately you propose or you recommend that we file the rules for adoption. We will do that as an agency. We open up the comment period. We come back to you as a board, present any of the public comments, and allow you to evaluate the comments and determine whether or not the rules as proposed need to be changed to address the comments or any other concerns. At that point, we ask you to make a recommendation to our governing board, the commission, to adopt the rules. And so you can see it's a lengthy process, but it also requires your involvement. So we're not meeting just now, but we have meetings slated for early January and early March. And that is part of the effort. We have to have rules adopted to implement House Bill 3029 no later than April 1st of next year. So we're on a tight timeline. We're going to ask a lot of you in terms of showing up over the next several months. But we're hoping that will help us deliver a good and consistently good product that's easy to understand. David, do you have anything to add?
Just a little bit.
Thank you.
David Gonzalez, Regulatory Programs Manager. So our executive director, in his ultimate wisdom, when he assigns these bill implementation teams, he incorporates not only our general counsel, who's very versed, and I applaud Doug. He's learned so much in the short time that he's been with us on all of our technical programs, but we also have representation from our education examination division, from people outside of our program, so that we're not in a vacuum, all doing groupthink, to make sure that the questions that could be answered by the public or that would come up from the public are addressed as well. So that's part of the bill implementation team appointments that he's used wisdom. The only other point that I wanted to make is this is a public process, so yes, we present it to you and we need y'all's input, but it's also that presentation to the public, that feedback, and we do pretty good at the groups here for ACR. We get attendance, but we really need everybody's eyes on for a new license type. So promote it with the industry, with your organizations and associations. If they have interest in this, if they want to see the industry prosper, we need the input to make sure it can be as streamlined as possible. We do have a lot of work cut out for us in the next few months, but we've handled it before. It'll get done. And the big hump for us is getting over the November 1st date when the 6 programs come to us all at once. All of my participants on my bill implementation team say, please, just give me a couple more weeks for these other programs so that we can get focused on the ACR stuff. So once we get past that November 1st date with those other programs, we'll be able to focus on these. It will be a quick timeline, and obviously y'all's input will be very important. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions? Happy to answer them.
On behalf of the board, this has been a long time coming, so I ask each and every member to preempt those dates.
January and March.
Yeah,
January
right
and
now,
March.
we'll talk about this later on, but right now we have slated Wednesday, January the 3rd, and Monday, March the 5th as the next meeting. And it's vital that we have a quorum for both of those meetings, and so we just wanted to give you fair advance notice.
Thank you so much. We're committed to moving forward. It's been a long time coming. Thank you so much.
you.
Bill Weatherly, have a question. Are there, now with this new category, will there be statutory requirements and restrictions between licensing, or is this more, I understand having better trained and better qualified technicians. Now, will the registered technician still be a viable category? And then I guess the old certified technician will go away. Is that the idea?
Well, the idea, I think, let me address the first part of your question, is that all of the current license types will maintain their present viability. There's not going to be any change of duties. There are no additional restrictions. So current licensees, nothing is going to change really for them. And even for presently certified technicians, as that terminology is used prior to HB 3029. And once again, we have grandfathering provisions in the bill that will continue that certification, that designation of a certified technician, will continue that program, frankly, until none of those licensees want to go that track anymore. But again, we are creating this kind of new license type. But it's not going to. The bill, I think, is helpful in the fact that it's not going to prejudice anyone who is currently licensed or really change the roles or responsibilities. In fact, as you'll eventually see, we're not having to make too many changes to the rules because the responsibilities of the various license types aren't really changing. Technicians across the board can't engage in fraud. They have to, be supervised. They have to maintain, electromechanical integrity, things of that nature. So we're not seeing a real game changer for the other license types. It's more of an opportunity for new licensees.
Well, that's good. I would think as a contractor, air conditioning contractor, having certified technicians, I mean, that would also be, marketing.
Yeah.
For the consumer, you would want to work with someone that had certified technicians if the public understands it.
Right, right, and that frankly, that may be it may be confusing because we have these, and we'll continue to have two types of certified technicians, and we're not going to, as an agency, I believe we're not going to make someone who is a certified technician under the previous law say, oh, I'm just under the previous law. No, the rules will say they get to call themselves a certified technician. And so, that may be a tricky issue to figure out because both types of licensees will get to call themselves that. And, the law, the HB 3029 says that we have to let them. I mean, we wouldn't, I don't think we'd go that way anyway on our own initiative, but you know, we've been instructed by the legislature to keep both programs intact.
That answers my question.
Thank you.
Hey, Doug, Dave Yelovic. Just being an average Joe, is it just me, or give me a little history on this thing, because I'm just curious. Did anyone on staff or whatever, when the sponsors, I would assume the sponsors of this bill would have come to you and said, hey, we want to do this thing. Does this wording make sense to you? Because this is just watching when you're going through there, the eyeballs in this room kind of like, huh? The terms they use, you're right. You said this could be confusing. Why was this bill written in such a way with words that will create confusion for years to come, instead of just choosing either different words, different titles, different something? How much input did this group have as far as putting this bill together? Because it's, at first glance, you're right, very confusing.
Right. David, do you have any? No?
David Gonzalez, Regular Programs Manager. We are available as resources during the legislative session, and definitely the industry and the organizations that sponsor these bills, they'll go to their legislator. Typically, we're invited to give input. I've had our executive leadership describe lawmaking in the past as sausage making. You don't really want to watch it being done. Sometimes the input that we give is going to be taken under advisement. Sometimes because of the restrictions and the current regulatory environment, there may be certain accommodations made to ensure that we're not going beyond what anybody wants in the regulatory environment at this time. The fact that this particular legislation got passed, it is a new license type, but provides additional pathways. So it was not looked at as more regulation. It was, I think, looked upon as a new path, more opportunities, and a higher level of competency. It made it successful. I think we had our input help with that, but really when it's in the hands of the legislator and the industry, it's their bill. We act as resources, and we find ways to make it work within our current system of regulatory environment. Now, the name changes, it could have been a killer for some if they thought it was a different license type. Certification versus old certification. Those are things that maybe in hindsight we could have added something or asked for something as a different name, but at this point, I don't know if that would have helped the situation. Calling it a different name may have actually made it to where it stalled, and nobody wanted to vote for it because it was looked upon as a different license.
And Mary Winston, just to add to David's, it's not our call, plain and simple. As a regulatory body, if we are asked for information, we provide it, but it's ultimately not our call. What is the sausage that we end up getting is what we get, and we try to work with it as best we can. And if we don't understand, we call and we ask questions and so forth. But we're invited only if we're invited. We're asked only if we're asked. And even if we provide information, once the sausage making begins, it may be used and it may not be. So, but once we get what we get, we come to you and we ask for some help cutting up the sausage.
Earlier, Nick had shared lots of numbers about the bills that you were tracking.
Yes.
And to me, I was thinking, well, that means, hey, we're tracking this particular one. These words might be confusing. We need to jump on that and do something. But it sounds like we're just the wide receiver catching the pass after the fact, and we say, okay, let's deal with it. And so there's no proactive kind of input.
We're not really allowed to be, as a regulatory agency, proactive in the legislative process. We are at those meetings, and if they see us and they say, TDLR is in the room, and they ask a question, we try to answer it. But we do track it, but we are a bit of a wide receiver. I'm not a wonderful football analogy person.
Well, let's just say, I assume you said, again, a bunch of committee stuff, you were in front of committees.
Yes.
At any point, did someone say, hey, TDLR reps, is this wording going to be confusing, or are you all okay with this? What was said at that point?
Now, I can't exactly remember the conversation, but I also can tell you, I don't really think anybody asked us if we were okay with anything.
Okay.
And
So-
if I
We'll
may,
leave it at that.
if I may, Doug Jennings, Assistant General Counsel, you know, we did have the opportunity to review the bill at some point, and we worked with our government relations employees in the room and made them aware that this was a confusing issue. And so, to the extent that they're able to bring that to a legislator's attention, or that the legislator heeds that advice, we did put it out there. Though I mean, we all saw when we saw this bill, we said, well, that use of terminology is not ideal. We sure would like something else. But unfortunately, as Ms. Winston said, it's not our call, and so now we have to react to it. And we're just going to have to be creative and dynamic in our approach, and it is going to pose some confusion. But I don't want to get too hung up on that, because substantively, the license types are different. Yeah, and it is a kind of an intermediate step, and so we're enthusiastic about this new license type. We just wish it was called something else. But if that's our only hang-up, then I'd say we're in good shape.
I think we can also distinguish it. You out in the profession, it's distinguishable. It's the terminology is off-putting a little bit, but I think with some FAQs, with some rules that Doug's going to be drafting, that the board will be reviewing, we can get there.
Don't get me wrong, I'm very excited about
Right.
it, but I'm like you. I'd like to go back through the transcript of this tape or whatever and see how many times you said confusing
Yes.
in your testimony here.
Well, I just want to be very clear. It's difficult to describe, especially if someone is not. I actually don't know. It might be easier to describe to someone who is unfamiliar with the original license type. But for people well versed as yourselves, I think it actually is more difficult of a conversation to have because you may be familiar with the previous certified technician type, trying to distinguish them. So yes, it gets a little bit out there, the discussion, but we'll do things with our rules that will make it clearer for everyone. And probably over time we'll see a declining number of the previous type of license, and eventually there won't be any confusion. But for right now, we're in transition, but we'll make it work.
Dolores Compion. I'm a retired state employee, Department of Corrections. I've been a wide receiver for a long time. So with that said, thank you so much, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave.
I do. This is Gary Halsey. I have a comment and a question. First comment, I've noticed that we've been using the word license to refer to this certification. That I would like to see. That's going to create confusion. These are not licensed. We have three categories. We have a license, which contractors hold, and you're permitted by law to practice in this field. Then you have a certification for technicians, and then you have a registration for technicians. So to use that term license is confusing and could bleed out to the public. Oh, well, he's got a license. They're not licensed. So that, the other is, has there been a walkthrough generated, a document on the prior requirements or the existing requirements as opposed to the new requirements?
We are creating those materials now.
For the certified technician?
Yes, we are creating some FAQs specifically addressing, the existing program, certified technician, and the new type of certified technician. So I believe we'll make it clear to everyone what the differences are. Anyway, we are generating that internally.
A major difference that I see, and correct me if I'm wrong, John or anybody else here, please, is that under the current statute is that you've got to have 10, you have got to have accomplished a training program nationally or some recognized program approved by TDLR. The new one is I could actually get this by experience and pass a test.
Right, and there is a competency exam involved for this.
So the new certification program does not require a training program to have been attended. That is a path that you can take, but there's multiple paths now to get the certified program.
That is correct. They're either having taken a certification training program or have 24 months of supervised practical experience.
Okay,
That's correct.
Also
there will
make sure
also
my understanding was correct.
Yes,
Very
it
good,
is.
thank you.
It is. And I would like to address your first comment regarding using the word license. Trust me, when I use that word here, I do so sparing. I try to do so sparingly. I just wanted to, conceptually, laying out the principle. I have found that in drafting the rules, you quickly find these long, unwieldy phrases, and granting a certification is just it gets a little bit cumbersome and tiresome. I told David before the meeting, I said this will be the first time I use the word license and the last time today, and it's to introduce the concept. And from here on out, we'll be resorting to our, just as we do for existing certified technicians, they're granted a designation. The new type will be granted a certification. So introducing the concept today, all the terminology will change, and I completely agree with your comment.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
No further questions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We move on to item H. I'll cover item H. So, look, the dynamics of the board has changed within the last couple of months, and so we have a lot of new board members. So, we didn't have a quorum on the last meeting that we had, so what I would like to propose is recreate the work group to answer some of these questions on Manual J. I would like to be on it. Do I have any volunteers?
I volunteer. Gary Halsey.
Mr. Halsey?
So, Mr. Chairman, in reading this agenda, a discussion of work group findings.
Mr. Halsey, for just 1 second. Let's get a work group together
Yes,
first.
sir.
So we got Mr. Bittner, myself, Dolores Compion. That's 3. Anybody else? Mr. Yelovich? That'd be 4. Everybody capture the names?
We did.
All right. We don't necessarily need to go into, we'll discuss that during the work group on the whatever you were just fixing to read.
No, my question is that it said discussion of work group findings, implying that it already existed and they had finding to present. So there was no work group?
Well, there was a work group, but the work group, make sure I get the names correct. I'm going to look back on the notes. Mr. Trevor Brown is no longer with the on the board.
I see.
Mr. Rosenberg is no longer with the board, and so it kind of diluted, and those individuals will not have the opportunity to present an opinion at this point in time. So I want to regroup this and have another work group that can work simultaneously, because we have 2 pre-existing work group members, and we can all have our input and provide that to the attorneys, whoever is going to be, and the compliance division, whoever is going to be on that work group.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask that what is the history? How did this question come about?
Actually, it came about, if I may, I think there's, and I don't want to misstate the previous minutes, I think Mr. Phelan, is that correct? Attorney? Thielen, I'm sorry, my apologies. Presented some questions during a recap of the enforcement of some particular cases. And so therefore, there were some questions that came about as to whether a outside company or friend or contractor could perform manual J calculations and provide them to a licensed individual, and the question came up that that individual who was providing those particular calculations needed to be licensed by the state and or some type of governing body, and so that was the core question. I think that moving forward, there has to be a secondary question to that, and if I may say this now, and please stop me if I'm incorrect, I think it was a twofold question. We only looked at it in one aspect, where we were basically saying, do we need to exempt this particular action in this particular design question, or do we need to address maybe some of the language so our enforcement team can look at it from that aspect of the question? And so therefore, it's not as clear-cut as we originally thought. And so therefore, two-part, in my opinion, at this point, is that do we need to strengthen some of the language to support our enforcement division for those individuals who are providing manual J calculations to licensed contractors? And or therefore, does that individual who wants to contract with a license holder be licensed as well? I think those are some of the discussions that this work group is going to find not an easy task.
Very good questions, though.
So hopefully I answered the question respectfully.
Yeah, I was just reiterate, we've been seeing lately in some trends in some of the AC cases that we've seen where a contractor had missized the system and we were asking them for their manual J's, and they're like, well, here's the company that provided it to me. I didn't actually do it. I used this other company. So it's something that we're starting to see percolating in the industry, the rise of individuals who solely just do manual J's for other people. And so we wanted to bring your attention. I think that was what Trevor's intentions were, and so I think this work group will be great to help out with that. Question is whether or not can an individual do this without having a license, or do we need them to be licensed?
Well, Dolores Compion, so this particular question is very important, or this particular work group is very important because it has a lot of tentacles. It leaches out into the penalty matrix. Mm-hmm. It leaches out into, it's nothing that we can do as far as the statutes are concerned. That's kind of being the wide receiver. We're dealt that particular hand and we have to play it. But some of the rules may be strengthened in language, and that will be in conjunction with the compliance team. And so therefore, like I said, and naturally this is a very subjective topic where we may open a Pandora's box to, well, now we want to do duct design and we want to do equipment selection, and we're fapping all this work out to individuals, and then the licensee wants to hit the easy button and go, hey, well, they did it. You need to go talk to them. I don't think that was the intent of the rule per se. But as we move forward with technology and other aspects of our business in our industry, those questions are going to be very difficult, and we have to address them as a board and provide some resolution.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Elsie, so it sounds like almost, because the rules are very explicit on design. It says no design will be subcontracted out to any unlicensed contractor, period. In fact, it states it no less than 3 times in that document. So it sounds like at the heart of this question, what's this activity manual J calculation called? What is this? What are we doing here? Is that design? If it is, the law already answers the question.
And if
So it'll be a good work group, that's for sure.
Yeah, and
so, yes, sir.
Rob Standley, you know, the definition of air conditioning and refrigeration contracting means the performance of the design, installation, construction, repair, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it basically, you know, the number 2 on the definitions states that you've got, you know, the contractor is doing the design of the system itself.
I would agree, but at the same time, we've just had a lot of
Yeah.
issues coming up, and we've had some very creative arguments from the other side. So we figured, let's go ahead and nip this in the bud before it becomes a widespread issue.
Yeah, Dolores Compion, absolutely full support here, and this is going to be an interesting work group, and look forward to discussing it with some of the team members. So thank you. We'll move on to, if there are no further questions, we'll move on to item I. Recommendations for the next agenda item or recommendation for agenda items for the next board meeting. I think we already have some of those. Work group's going to come back with some questions or some answers or maybe more questions, whatever that looks like. We can put that on the item. There was something else that's going to get brought up.
Mary Winston, TDLR, the discussion from the work group with penalty matrix. So
Yes, ma'am. That is correct.
will be the second work group discussion that will happen if we put it on that agenda.
Thank you so much. If no other further questions on the
Mr.
item?
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I had in fact, I had emailed a request for this meeting, and so we need to put it on the next agenda item, please. And I brought my copy of it, how I worded it exactly. Did anyone here got that? So let me
Halsey?
give me just a second.
Oh, Mr. Halsey, yes. I wanted to just acknowledge on the record that we had already filed the agenda, and that's why we put a pause.
Oh, I understand.
So,
I knew
yes.
it was a shot in the dark.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
But I would like to introduce that as an agenda item now for Chairman
Perfect.
to consider.
Absolutely. It's already in the works. Is that correct? Dolores Compion.
We do have notice of it, and it's timely this time, so that we can place it in the agenda for next time.
Should I state what that item is?
You can, yes.
Okay, it was a request to review the license designate or licensing structure, how we have it now, A and B, environmental, refrigeration, and the requirements associated with licensing. So it's licensing specific, not certifications or registrations.
Okay.
And there's a work group, a request to form a work group to look at that.
We'll cover that in the next
Yes.
meeting as far as assigning a work group.
Yes, and actually, yes, we have brought it up, we have it on the record, and it's just these darn open meetings requirements that we have to go through.
That is correct, absolutely.
Which kind of, if we don't get it in time, we've posted it, we have to post it for a certain amount of time. So we do have it now to set for an agenda item for the next one. So a work group will not be appointed. We have notice of it, we can actually put that on the agenda, and we'll pass that forward with Ms. Stew at that time.
Dolores Compion. Thank you, absolutely. So time and date, I think it's what is a good time and date?
January 3rd and
January the 3rd?
about 10 a.m.
About 10 a.m.?
Sounds like January 3rd and March 5th to me.
10 a.m. work for you, Doug?
It works for me if it works for you. I'm more concerned about your schedules, not mine.
January 3rd and March what?
I'm a builder. I'd like to do it about 6:30 in the morning.
Maybe I should modify my previous statement.
All right, so next meeting is January 3rd, 10 a.m. Do we want to set the next one?
Monday, March 5th.
Monday, March 5th.
Both at 10 a.m.
Thank you. We move on to item K, adjournment.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I would like to think that very thing helps this. I mean, in the past, this committee, we've been asked, kind of on the drop of a hat, hey, are you busy on this date? And by then, our calendars are all filled up, and it's difficult to attend. The further out we schedule these things for everybody, it makes for a much more, easier way to get a quorum. And I appreciate you scheduling 2 at a time. This is really good for scheduling purposes.
Dolores Compion, thank you, Mr. Yelovich. I got one thing right today. And so, with that said, we're going to call the meeting to adjournment at 11:31.